South Asia, home to nearly 2 billion people. And the UK diaspora is over 4 million, nearly 7% of the population. That's the equivalent of Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, Sheffield, Liverpool, and Newcastle added together. But are those numbers reflected in our country's footballers? In English football, there are around 3,700 male players and 1,100 female players in their respective top 4 divisions. Only 0.6% of them have South Asian heritage. The number of South Asian people in the UK is growing, but when it comes to playing football for this section of our population, it's not been simple. And has that ever been addressed?
We have to talk about the barriers, because how are we going to find the solutions for that? I think the last 30 or 40 years has shown that we haven't talked about it and we've never solved the problem. So if we don't know what the problem is, then how are we going to solve it?
I think it's important to talk about the barriers, because if we don't, we're keeping silent. And we should be supported to speak out. By keeping quiet and being submissive or subservient, that's not what we need to do. So we need to actually speak out, we need to share our stories. That basically informs what stakeholders do. It helps kind of influence policy, influence change.
We know cricket is the most popular sport in South Asia itself, but for South Asian people in this country, that's not the case. The latest Active Lives survey showed twice as many South Asian adults play football than cricket.
I think if you were to do a poll, even previous generations, even if you arrived from India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka a few years ago, you fairly quickly get the football bug. And those of us that are born here, football is far more interesting to us than cricket will ever be.
Why is that so believed and widespread when it's so false?
What people do is sort of take on board what they see on TV, which is we're absent there. But when the cricket is shown, we're very present. The most powerful cricketing country in the world is India because of the IPL. But when you look at international football, we're nowhere. And so I think people are reflecting what they see and then internalising it, and that becomes their perspective on the world.
When I was doing my PhD, I remember going around inner city Bradford in predominantly British South Asian areas, predominantly British Pakistani areas, and just walking to this field to kind of spend some time with some of the local clubs, and there's footballs flying in every single direction. There's not a cricket ball or bat in sight. Many people will tell you the same thing, that football is massive now.
The traction that the Pakistan team has been getting from all the fans. And the last time I went over there as well was in Faisalabad. So we actually played a game out there, which was the first time in years. And the first game we had there were 20,000 fans, but it actually sounded like 50. So it's been amazing, I think a lot of people associate it with the cricket teams, but the way the football's going, it's really going in a great direction.
This is the comment made at the start of the year from a pre-academy scout at Crystal Palace on LinkedIn, saying, Asian families put all their efforts into education, plus they're more aligned to the game of cricket, don't think it's pushed in their families or in their culture. Boys following this sport are far and few in this industry. It was called out on social media by multiple people as a prime example of harmful stereotypes that still exist within the game.
I hear about clubs and associations and bodies talking about making an effort of making clubs more inclusive or of creating these initiatives and opportunities. But then you've got someone at a club, at a Premier League club, no doubt, who has a viewpoint, and you're thinking, how many more are there out there? And I think his words carry a lot of weight. We have to challenge that stereotypes. And sometimes the way stereotypes are challenged is through words, and I don't think words are enough. Sometimes you have to show the visibility. The
first stereotype the Asians have to us, right? We don't have that wealth, we don't have that level of education. Our parents were not all doctors and chemists. I think that's a really important point. There is a stereotype out there that people think that we're all, from those sort of professions. So it's a very diverse internal community.
Crystal Palace say they discussed the matter with the scout, and like all employees, he was given training in equality, diversity and inclusion. The club would not comment publicly because they say it's an internal matter. It's not the first time we've seen this happen. Former FA chairman Greg Clark resigned in 2020 after making inappropriate comments before Parliament about ethnicity, homosexuality and gender. It included suggesting different career interests led South Asian people to choose jobs in IT over sport. Clark apologised, but for many, these are lazy and ill-educated stereotypes that have an impact in real life.
When I talk to parents of this generation, they're more than supportive of their girls playing football. If anything, they're asking me, how can I do more to help her play? So it's really great to be having those kind of conversations. My dad was obviously really happy for me to be playing football, especially the Derby. He's a big Derby fan. Also my mum as well, she was really happy for me to be playing football. So on a Saturday, my mum would take me to my games, and on a Sunday, my dad would take me. I was always lucky to have both my parents' support, as well as even my grandparents. Both sets of my grandparents love the fact that I played football, which I know is something really unique and something that I cherish and makes me feel quite special.
The support's been huge, not just my dad, my mum. So come home from training, my mum's making food for my family, and it's for right food for nutrition, getting stronger. So yeah, there's different ways they've supported me, so they're not just on the same role. So sometimes my mum would take me to training and my dad would stay home and make some food, or vice versa. So, there's different ways they've supported me, but I'm very thankful.
I've been so lucky with the parents that I have, because they're the ones that have pushed me on, especially with my dad. It was his dream as well to have a son and that plays football. It's something that he wanted to do, when he was younger. Obviously, he didn't get the chance to, but then I think seeing me play football, I'm not only living my dream, I think I'm living his as well.
Back in the 60s and 70s, when people were emigrating here from South Asia, obviously priorities are different, and football probably wasn't a priority. Getting a job was, getting an education was. And that, I'm guessing, is where that stereotype has come from. How different is that now? Have you seen that in your research?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the first generation, exactly as you've said, the key thing was food on the table, roof over your head, having a job, earning money. And that's obviously what first generation migrants would be doing. But as we get into second generation, third generation, you get that progressive generational difference. And culture evolves, culture's fluid, culture always changes, it never stays static. And to suggest that British South Asian families are still the same from 50, 60 years ago, it isn't true.
We just can't say it's an issue because the families they all want to be doctors, lawyers, accountants. Give me a break. That's not what it is anymore. Fourth generation South Asian in this country, and we can't find one Premier League footballer. It's embarrassing, to be honest.
One of the big stereotypes I've heard over the years has been that South Asians are too weak to become professional footballers.
Asian players seem to get stereotyped into too weak or too small, and obviously I'm trying to prove that wrong. And obviously Scotland is a very physical league, and I've seen to cope and do well, so I think they have to look aside that stereotype, but it definitely still happens.
I think that the racialisation of British South Asian bodies, for example, in that sense of not big enough, not quick enough, and I hear the way that a lot of recruiters and talent ID personnel have said over the years, and coaches have said, British South Asians, very technical, very good, but not big enough to compete. Unfortunately, I think that mindset is still ingrained in a lot of people.
I never thought being small was really a negative. I always thought smaller players tend to be more agile, faster. Sometimes smaller players have better technique on the ball, Messi, for example, he's one of the shortest players. So I never really thought of it as a negative. I mean, physically, you can struggle, but I just think it's just the way you play, so not get into physical battles, or maybe you're not as strong, but being there, your speed or cardio or something else can help replace that in a way.
We know that there is a lot of unconscious bias within football. Asian players are always told they are skinny and they're not big enough for football. Can we say that's fully gone?
When I go into a club and I talk about South Asian players, I would tell coaches about being patient with the players. Leif goals at Brighton, Leif was 12, he was skinny, dwindly. Get to 16, he's built out. But I think the game has changed, Mary, if I'm honest. Players are all sorts of sizes now. I do feel all we need is more visibility. Players need opportunities. So when a coach looks at an Asian player, what's he really seeing? He doesn't know. What's he going to be like? Maybe he doesn't know. I think now as well, clubs are more accountable. So the Premier League, the PJAC do audits. So when a player is released from a club, or doesn't get a professional contract, that shouldn't be a surprise, because every 6 weeks there's meetings with the player, with the club, where they are in terms of their ILP, their physical, technical, tactical, social, and there will be a decision based on that. And if the player is behind physically, because I'm now in clubs, all the clubs basically across the country, having these sort of conversations with clubs about South Asian players, about the recruitment strategies, about the number of scouts they have, where they scout. It's just sort of like planting the seed.
One of the stereotypes that we've heard over the years is that the South Asian diet doesn't lend itself to producing professional athletes and professional footballers. I think this is the most racist thing I've heard in a long time, actually, because it's sort of hitting at the core of an identity.
Athletic-wise, obviously Indian and Pakistanis, they're not, people have sort of say they're like skinny and things like that, their diet, obviously, which is sort of completely untrue. You see a lot of the British Pakistanis now, 6'5", they're big, really good athletes. So.
I look back and I look at, well, all the stereotypes that we had about black players in the 1970s, and Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham and Brendan Batsman were massively seminal in the first era of colour television in changing all those things. 90% of those have been busted around black players, right, and have been hugely successful.
Not all of them, though. Not all of them.
Not quite all of them.
Yeah.
But that should give us cause for optimism, because all these are more stereotypes and biases about a different community. Well, if we bust those myths over the last 40 years for black players, that's the optimism to say we can bust these myths.